and here I sit, opposite my marriage counselor and next to my wife of 26 years. I feel confused, depressed, and angry are just a few of the emotions that are ready to burst out. There is another emotion that I simply cannot describe. The only thing I know for sure is that I don't feel anything for the woman sitting next to me. I sit sullenly, thinking to myself whether it's worth continuing to try or whether it's better to let everything go and take the easy path. Divorce. I guess I'll make that decision after I hear what she has to say. I think I should tell you a little about myself before I continue. My name is Todd Smith. I am 50 years old. I have been married to my wife Stacy for 26 years, and we have two wonderful children, Mike and Terry. Mike is a freshman at a small private Division Roman II university studying engineering and on a baseball scholarship. Terry is the older of the two. She is a sophomore at the University of North Carolina and is well on her way to earning her pharmacy degree. Stacy and I couldn't be prouder of our kids. You could say that Stacy and I met like many people did in the late 80s, at a party my junior year of college. It was an open fraternity party. I was hanging out with friends in the backyard listening to a band when I saw her go out on the back porch to smoke. I was about 20 meters away from her, but from where I stood it was obvious that she was a real beauty. Long brown hair, slim athletic figure, long luscious legs, about 120 pounds with perfect 36C breasts. However, this is not what attracted me. It was her eyes. Even from this distance, I could see her perfect blue eyes. Like the deep waters of an endless ocean, they drew me in from the moment I saw her. My friends kept talking to me, but I just couldn't take my eyes off her. Looking back, I really looked like a drunken idiot standing there. Finally, after 3 minutes, my best friend Sean asked me if I was going to go up to her and talk or just watch her all night. I tried to compose myself, came out of my trance, and began to prepare for my step. She looked at me, smiled, and then turned her head and went back to the party. Sean called me a fool and told me to go get her number before I lost her. Despite my condition, I realized that I might have missed this opportunity, so I started to catch up with her. After about 15 minutes of wading through the crowd, I walked out onto the front porch and finally saw her. She was getting into a Honda Accord with some girls and getting ready to leave. When she looked at me from the window, I caught a quick smile as she looked me straight in the eyes, and that was the last time I saw her for almost 2 years. From time to time, I remembered her smile and beautiful eyes. Let me say that the University of Georgia is a very big place. So much so that on a normal day, I almost never ran into my friends unless they were studying in the same major as me. That didn't stop me from looking for Stacy. I spent a little time every day looking at people walking around campus, hoping to see her. When that didn't work, I asked Sean to help me. When that didn't work, we started eating at different cafeterias around campus. When that didn't work, I started studying in different cafeterias for several hours, hoping that I would see her again and learn her name. But not fate. A year passed, and I never met her again. When my senior year began, I decided it was time to focus on something other than my non-existent romance with a magical girl with deep blue eyes. I was on track to earn a degree in finance, and by the spring I was expecting a high-paying job at a large firm in Atlanta. My stars were lining up. I was focused, ready to leave the University of Georgia and take on the world. I was at the top of my class, the offers started coming in, and all I had to do was choose my next step. And then it happened. Fate intervened. I was sitting at a traffic light, waiting for the light to turn green, when something caught my attention. She was sitting with her back to me about 200 yards away with another girl at a table, smoking a cigarette. I kept looking, trying to figure out if it was the same girl from the porch about 15 months ago. I sat there, hoping she would turn to me so I could see her face. But no luck. Until the light turned green. I didn't move, and the cars behind me started honking. So much so that my mystery girlfriend turned and looked in my direction to see what was going on. This gave me a good look at her face, and instantly all my hopes and dreams were threatened. I needed to meet this girl and talk to her. It was probably stupid or even reckless, but I put the car in park, turned it off, got out, and walked towards her. The people in the line of cars behind me were now shouting and honking, but I didn't care. I needed to meet this girl. When I approached her, she looked at me with a confused expression on her face, which made her even more attractive to me. As I got closer, I saw an understanding flash in her head. She recognized me, but confusion remained. When I got within 15 feet, she stood up, put out her cigarette under her foot, walked towards me, and stopped about an inch from my face. Her friend watched the moment in silence. She didn't say anything for about 20 seconds. She just looked me in the face. I could see her mind trying to remember where we met and was probably trying to figure out if I was a threat since I had just left my car at an intersection to meet her. We looked into each other's eyes, and then I saw a slight movement at the edge of her smile. She remembered where we met. She said, "I'm Stacy. You should have found me before I got in the car and took my number." Stunned, I told her I tried and all I saw was her leaving with her friends. She took out a notepad, wrote her number on it, and told him not to lose it. She then said, "If we're going to go on a date, we're going to need a car. Go get yours from the intersection before it's evacuated." I smiled, turned to leave, and she turned me around, without warning, kissed me hard on the lips. Looking at me, she said, "Now, go away and I expect you to call me soon." When I called later that night, Stacy and I talked for hours. It was an accident that she was on campus that day. She met her best friend Tony for lunch, and they just went out for a smoke, which she was trying to get rid of. She was a marketer, and even though we were on the same side of campus, she hadn't seen me since that party. Then she admitted that she also looked for me from time to time. We laughed because her search for me on campus led to a breakup with her boyfriend. He was angry that she was always busy talking to Tony about that guy at the party who left. I asked her out, and she readily agreed, and we went on a date the next evening. The date lasted until 2 a.m., when the bar closed and I walked her home. We ended the evening with a kiss at her door, and she said she had a great time and hoped that we could do it again soon. I drove home thinking that this would be the girl I would spend the rest of my life with. The next morning, right after I woke up, I called her. She started by asking why it took me so long to call her after our first date. I didn't know what to answer, because only 7 hours had passed since I kissed her on the doorstep. I remained silent until she cleared the air by laughing and saying that it was a joke and that she hoped I would call soon. She said she had a great time on our date and talked to Tony until 5 a.m. about him. This made me smile. I immediately asked her out again that evening, and she quickly agreed. The second date was better than the first. We had just finished eating at a small pizzeria near campus and were heading to the local bars. Suddenly, Stacy stopped, looked at me, and asked if I would prefer to go to her house instead of the bar. Her blue eyes sparkled as she spoke, and she quickly convinced me that conversation at her home would be much quieter and more intimate. She already had a bottle of wine on ice, and more importantly, we'd be closer to her bed if I decided to stay the night. With an expression reminiscent of the surprise when she first kissed me, I nodded and followed her home. We never finished the bottle of wine we opened when we arrived at her house. Well, technically, we finished it when we got out of bed 2 days later. Making love to her for the first time was magical. I've been with other girls before, but I've never felt this way. She knew what to do. She knew how to take me to heights that I had never felt before. She made my body do things I didn't even think were possible. After the third time in 18 hours, I was exhausted. I slept 10 hours straight with her, and if it wasn't for Tony waking us up, we probably would have missed class on Monday. We continued dating, and soon I was spending all my time at Stacy and Tony's apartment. My best friend and roommate Sean was very happy about it. He and his new girlfriend Beth could now walk around our apartment naked. What can I say? They were quite free spirits who loved to walk around naked. We all graduated together this spring, and as expected, all 5 of us landed good positions in Atlanta. I became the second accountant in a medium-sized industrial company. Stacy accepted an entry-level marketing manager position. Tony chose a different path. She went to Emory Law School and graduated a few years later. passed the bar exam the first time and found a great job as an attorney in downtown Atlanta. The biggest shock for us was Sean and Beth. After graduating with degrees in business and economics, they took jobs with the Atlanta police. Yes, we were all shocked when Sean told me that they had been accepted into the police force. I thought that their carefree lifestyle would not allow them to pass the standard drug test. However, he told me that he and Beth decided it was time to grow up and become adults, and there was no better place to do that than in law enforcement. You could say that our company was the best of friends. We met weekly, except during football season, when we saw each other more often, especially every Saturday for Bulldogs football games. We had barbecues, hung out and played games, went out to eat, to the movies, and did all the things best friends do. Life has been pretty good for all of us. Fast forward a few years. Stacy and I sat on the back porch of our house, looking at all that we had been blessed with. We had money, beautiful house, nice cars. We went on great holidays on our own and with friends. I was the vice president of finance at my company and expected to get a corner office in 10 years. Stacy was the head of Southeast marketing for a large athletic shoe company and couldn't be happier. Or so I thought. As she took a sip of her sparkling wine, she looked at me with that sparkle in her eyes that I loved so much and asked if I had noticed that she had quit smoking a few months ago. I said yes, but I wasn't going to mention it so she wouldn't start smoking again. She said that's not the only thing she's given up in recent months. She said she had also stopped taking birth control pills and we would be having a baby very soon. Thus began a new stage of our life together. About 20 more years passed. Now I am the president of our small company. We have expanded to approximately $150 million in annual sales and are growing successfully in all areas. We were growing over 15% annually, and the revenue was amazing. I received an excellent salary, and my annual bonus was usually over 200% of base. Most people said that our success was due to my sharp mind, but I think it was my willingness to take risks that allowed us to reach levels never seen before. Stacy was now the senior vice president of marketing at the same shoe company she had started working with. She was also doing great at work. She had a huge team and control over the entire S market. In our personal lives, we invested wisely in the market and often earned more in one day than our annual salary brought in. We had over $18 million in the bank, and our future looked very bright. Our children, who have been the focal point of our lives for the past 22 years, have attended universities and gone on to successful careers. Once again, fate intervened in our lives, but this time it was not as pleasant as the last time. It was Friday night, and I was sitting on my back porch, relaxing with a glass of my favorite beer. Blues music was playing on the radio, and I was relaxing after a hard week. My eyes were closed, so I didn't see Stacy come out. She was on a week-long retreat in the Chattahoochee National Forest in North Georgia with her firm. I really hated it when they went to this place since there was no cell service. We couldn't communicate all this time. I just heard her place her glass of wine on the table next to me, and she surprised me by lighting a cigarette. She hasn't done this for almost 20 years. Curious, I opened my eyes, turned, and looked at her. It immediately became obvious that something was wrong. The blue eyes that I had adored and looked at for the past 27 years were empty, something I had never seen before. I said nothing and waited, knowing she had to say something. It wasn't good. She took a long sip of wine, took a deep drag from her cigarette, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I cheated on you. I'm so sorry." Emotions were swirling in my head. Confusion, anger, pain, suffering. What did she just say? She said she cheated on me. Did I hear her correctly? I looked at her and said, "Repeat that." She lowered her head and repeated in a whisper, "I cheated on you. I'm so sorry." Instantly, anger took over. I have never felt so betrayed in my life. The girl of my dreams was sitting in front of me. The only girl I've ever really loved. The girl I would die for, and she just told me she slept with someone else. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. I wanted to grab her by the throat, shake her, give her a slap, and I'm ashamed to admit, hit her. Knowing that I would do something stupid if I didn't pull myself together, I stood up and went inside. Standing in shock, I could just think about running, and I ran. She calmly stood up, walked through the house, took her wallet and keys, looked at the phone and decided to leave it, got into the car and drove away from the house, leaving her on the back porch crying alone. The anger continued to take hold of me and held me for several hours, leaving everyone else. Mother of my children, best friend, a partner for life. Damn her. To hell with the horse she came on. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I continued to drive and think about the worst things a husband could think in my situation. I had nowhere to go and I didn't want to get there quickly. I drove until late at night and early in the morning until I finally stopped at a motel. I had already bought a bottle of Irish whiskey before I checked in and started drinking, eventually passing out. It wasn't until the next day that I found out I had made it to Homestead, Florida. Why Homestead? I don't know. I've never been there. No one I knew lived in South Florida. I just drove south and carried on. This is where a full tank of gas led me. Why did I wake up? Because the maid opened the door and said that it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the checkout time had passed. Sore and hungover, I stood up, got into my car, and continued driving south toward Key West, Florida. I thought this was the best place to hide and drink myself into oblivion. Stacy. I sat on the back porch for 2 hours, crying, waiting for Todd to come back so we could talk about what I did last night. At first, I thought he went to make himself another drink. When he didn't return, I decided that he had gone to bed without me. When I finally went to look for him, he was gone. A quick call to his cell phone told me everything I needed to know. He was on the countertop, and he didn't want to talk to me or know where I was. I ruined his life, our marriage, and destroyed everything that had value to me. After spending most of the night crying in my bed, I woke up still wearing my clothes. I was alone in our house. My husband left. Todd didn't come back, and I was starting to get scared. Only a few times in our 27 years together have we spent more than one day without speaking to each other. Last week was one of these cases. It's just what loving people do. However, people who love each other do not sleep with other people they are not married to. I continued to cry all day. I finally called Tony and asked her to come see me. She had been my best friend for almost 30 years, and she immediately knew from the tone of my voice that I was in trouble and she needed to be here now. Like any best friend, she kissed her husband and told him that I was in trouble and she was coming to see me. She will be in touch all the time, but she needs help solving a serious problem that is tormenting me. An hour later, Tony entered my house with her key and found me in our bedroom in tears. She smelled the smoke from my cigarettes and immediately knew Todd must have left. She came up to me, hugged me, and asked if Todd had cheated on me with another woman. All I could do was turn and look at her, still crying. She immediately understood from my gaze that everything was much worse. I was the one who changed. I betrayed my husband. I broke trust. She hugged me and held me in her arms for several hours until I fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. 2 hours later, I woke up and saw Tony sitting in my room reading a magazine. She looked at me and softly asked if I wanted to eat something, drink something, and talk about it. I definitely wasn't hungry, but some Pinot sounded perfect. I told her the whole story, from the moment I left for the retreat until she came to my home. Not once did she ask questions or give me suspicious looks. She listened to me like a real friend. At the end, she looked at me and told me that everything would be okay and that Todd and I would somehow get through this. She then reminded me that she and her husband, Beth and Sean, would be there to help as needed. This is what true friends are for. After several hours of talking, it became clear that Todd was not going to return anytime soon. I called my kids and asked if they had heard from him, and they both said no. They asked why I was asking, and I lied and said I came back from a retreat where there was no communication and he wasn't home. Then I brushed it off, saying that he was probably away for the weekend with friends and forgot to leave a note and also ended up in a place with no contact. They were both a little angry at their father for his behavior, but I assured them that he probably told me and I forgot to write it down on my calendar. Night has come. Tony stayed, and we continued drinking wine until I fell asleep. The house now smelled of stale cigarettes and alcohol. How far I've fallen in 48 hours. Sunday morning came, and Todd still had not returned. It's Sunday evening, and he's still gone. Tony and I did nothing but look at each other, drink, and cry together from time to time. On Monday morning, I called my boss and said that after such a hard week at the retreat, I was feeling exhausted and needed a few days to recuperate. She was quite okay with it and said it would take a week. I deserve it after everything I've done for the company. Still no word from Todd. On Tuesday, Tony decided she couldn't wait any longer. We needed more help solving the problem. The first thing we did was call Francie, Todd's executive assistant. Francie was about 6 months away from retirement, but she had been like a second wife to Todd for over 10 years. If anyone could know where he was, it would be his work wife. All Francie could say was that he had sent an email from a personal account, saying he was taking a much-needed 2 weeks off and would not be available by phone or email. My heart was broken even more. I burst into tears again and continued to cry for several hours. During this time, Tony decided to involve professionals. She called Sean and Beth. They arrived a little later and listened to the story of my betrayal. Sometimes they asked questions. We were looking for more details. I had to tell every horrible detail of what I could remember. I think it was their police background. At the end, I begged them for help, and it took them less than a second to say that they would help without any hesitation. Sean said he would drop everything and find Todd. Beth looked me in the eye and swore that if it was the last thing she did, she would ruin Peter's life. Who is Peter? Well, by now you must have guessed that this is the man I cheated on my husband with at the retreat. Peter worked for our company and my group for about 7 years. He was a handsome, confident boy in his late 20s, married with 2 beautiful children and 1 very attractive wife. However, this did not stop him from flirting with all the women in the office. Todd and I met them all at a company picnic a few years ago, and while I wouldn't say we were best friends, we liked each other and sometimes hung out at company events. Like I said, Peter was always a flirt. He always told me how beautiful I was, how beautiful my eyes were, and made comments like, "Well, if you were my wife, blah, blah, blah." I thought it was flattering to hear this from someone 15 years younger, but I never took it seriously. I understood that his boyish sympathy was nothing more than an attempt to flirt with the boss in order to get into her good relationship. With his good looks and great muscles, why not flirt with your boss and move up the ranks faster? Let's be honest, we may not like it, but we're in marketing, and soft skills and flirting are an integral part of our job. For many years, this was the extent of our relationship until the retreat. On the last night of the retreat, everything went wrong. First, let me talk about the leadership retreat. This is for the best leaders and promising employees of the company. We stay at a leadership camp located in the heart of the Chattahoochee National Forest. This is a very exclusive place. It's in a forested area with no cell service, and the nearest anything is 10 miles away. It was designed that way, a week without external influence. No TVs, no radio, no mobile phones, no email or social media. In other words, there is no outside world. In case of an emergency, someone can call the camp organizers, but the entire team is prohibited from using the phone. At the beginning of the week, everyone is randomly assigned to pairs for the entire week. I got Peter. We did all the activities together. All victories were ours. All defeats were ours. We learned together. We made presentations together. We ate together. We drank together. And of course, we hung out together in the evenings. Everything seemed great until last night. The program ended and most of my marketing team was sitting around the fire with their teammates, relaxing. We had all been out of contact with the real world for a week, so the alcohol was flowing and everyone was joking and laughing with each other. Peter was quite drunk, as was I, and hugged me several times throughout the evening, celebrating our victories for the week. I didn't think about it much. Team building is the goal of the week. Everything was fun and innocent until he handed me a bottle of strong alcohol and told me to drink straight from it. I refused, and then he started teasing me. Make fun and tease, calling her an old woman. I vaguely remember him saying that I was not at all what he thought. I'm not as young and cool as he thought. Maybe I'm a little stuck in the past. I felt insulted. I wasn't old. I wasn't stuck in the past. I was going to show this young bully. I accepted his challenge and drank whiskey straight from the bottle several times. Looking back, the evening started to become a blur after that. It was like the few times I had too much to drink in college and passed out. However, this time something was different. It was fast. I felt dizzy. I lost consciousness. When I woke up the next morning, I was naked in bed with Peter lying next to me. It was bad. I was terrified. What have I done? Why did I break my marriage vows to my husband? I didn't remember much, but the stains on the bed clearly indicated that we had sex several times the previous night. I quickly jumped up and started getting dressed. Peter stirred and said, "Come on, baby, get back to bed and let's do this again." If I wasn't sure before that I had cheated, now I am absolutely sure. I quickly got dressed, grabbed my things, and at the last moment grabbed Peter's phone and ran out of the cabin. I was afraid that he could take a photo of me at night, and I wouldn't allow that. I immediately got into the car, started it, and drove home. It wasn't until I was 30 minutes from our house that I began to realize what I had done and, more importantly, how much it would hurt my husband. I stopped at a liquor store to pluck up my courage. Instead of the usual bottle of wine, I picked up a half pint of Captain Morgan's, and as I was about to pay, I saw a pack of Marlboro Light cigarettes. I haven't smoked for over 20 years, but today I really wanted to. I sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes and tried to work up the courage to face my husband and tell him the truth that would likely destroy our marriage. Todd, it's amazing how you can get lost when you want to. I was lucky to make it to Key West alive. I was drunk for the better part of 3 hours as I drove across bridges to the southernmost point of the United States. I didn't know where I was, I didn't plan, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My only thought was to drink myself into oblivion and cry myself to sleep. I found a cheap hotel a few blocks from the beach and paid 2 weeks in advance in cash. I didn't want Stacy to find me. I needed time to think. I knew that using credit cards would show her where I was, so I paid for everything in cash. I used the hotel computer to log into my Google account and sent Francie an email saying I was taking a 2-week vacation. I knew I needed this time to think about what I wanted to do with my life after my wife's terrible confession. I knew that I would soon have to go back online because the cash only lasted for 10 days, and then I would have to use the bank or credit cards. I assumed that my wife had not yet emptied our account in order to be with her lover. I thought about it for a brief moment, then took a strong swig of whiskey and tried to push the terrible thought out of my head. Being alone with your thoughts can be painful, very painful. Every worst nightmare about Stacy and her lover came to mind. She was with him for years behind my back. She's been with several men since we got married. Was he bigger than me? Was he a better lover than me? Was he a better person than me? Did all our friends know about her affair and laugh behind my back? Thoughts of them constantly flooded me, and I tried to remain in a state of almost drunkenness. I kept asking why did this happen to me, to us? The nice thing about Key West is that you can stay drunk most of the time and no one will care about you. Everyone just doesn't notice that you're drunk even at 9 a.m. I came to the conclusion that no one really cared about me or my problems. Since I left with nothing, I had to wear the same things every day. I didn't shave, and soon I had an unkempt beard. A few days later, looking in the mirror, I was no longer the president of a multimillion-dollar company. I only saw a stranger. I had sunk to the level of a stinking drunk, wandering the streets of Key West most of the day, depressed and angry at life. How low I have fallen. Sean. Useless. I couldn't find him. Todd did everything right. He disappeared and left no trace. If I didn't know Stacy better, I would have called the dogs to search the backyard on the first day. Beth and I pulled out all the stops. We tried to trace his credit cards and bank cards, but they were not used. The cameras showed him getting onto I-85 South, but as soon as the dot cameras ran out, so did Todd's trail. We knew he was most likely in South Georgia or Florida. But let's be honest, trying to track a black BMW 3 Series in South Georgia is as difficult as trying to track a silver Ford F-150. Everyone in the South has them. As a last chance, I called a friend from the Florida Highway Patrol Central Division and asked him to launch a bolo on Todd as a person of interest in the ongoing investigation. Maybe we'll get lucky and get a lead. With the help of my captain, this was the closest we could get to using official resources to find a missing person of this caliber. Meanwhile, my wife Beth was completely focused on Peter. She knew everything about him, including the name of his second-grade teacher, within 4 hours. For her, it was personal. She knew that Stacy had always considered Tony her best friend, but there was only one person she wanted in the wedding, and that was Beth. Stacy was like a sister to her. The first thing she did was take Peter's borrowed phone from Stacy and said she planned to hack it. When Tony reminded her, using her lawyer voice, that this was not exactly legal for an Atlanta police officer, Beth responded, "I think she was drugged with something. I think she's a victim." This quickly ended the conversation. It was clear that Beth was out for revenge. She believed that Stacy was innocent, and she was going to do anything to prove it. There were more tears from Stacy and Tony, but my wife didn't budge. She remained focused and determined. She was going to make Peter answer for what he did to her friend. It's amazing how stupid some people are with their passwords. It took hacker Beth 4 minutes to crack Peter's password with a little help from his personal information. Seriously, Peter, is your birthday in reverse order? Beth took the phone numbers from the phone and began matching them with the Atlanta police database. Within 20 minutes, she had a lead. The name Ack was recorded on the phone and linked to a known suspect in the sale of ecstasy and rohypnol. Beth made a connection. Now all she had to do was make Peter pay. Beth contacted 2 of her closest friends in the service, and they soon began tailing Peter and Ack, circumventing the law. They didn't have to wait long. On the very first night of surveillance, they saw Peter buying drugs from a suspected Ack in a club. Within minutes, Beth and her friends became bait for Peter, and he took the bait. 3 beautiful women approached him and started making eyes at him. He should have understood. I videotaped him from the second level of the club as he slipped something into Beth's drink while she was dancing on the dance floor with her friends. I gave the signal, and they threw him to the floor and handcuffed him. Too bad he broke his nose resisting arrest when he appeared to be trying to escape. Having kept Beth's vow, I now had to find Todd before he did something stupid. At this point, one wrong decision could ruin the rest of his, Stacy's, and their children's lives. Todd. It's easy to make friends when you don't care. After a week, I probably knew more people in Key West than I did in Atlanta. I would walk into a bar and everyone seemed to know my name. I was becoming a local resident, but I still suffered and felt broken. I still didn't know what I wanted to do next. Nothing came to mind. I knew I was running out of time to hide from my problems, but I just didn't see a way out. And then I met Kitty. I was sitting at the bar doing what I did every night. I drank, listened to music, and felt sorry for myself. As usual lately, I wasn't talking to anyone, drinking a lot and crying about my broken marriage. Everything I had worked for, everything I loved, seemed to be slipping away from me. My old life was slowly slipping away, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to it. And then she sat down next to me. She said her name was Kitty, and my first thought was, who would name their child Kitty? Seriously, this is a name for a dancer or an easygoing girl. I guess if you expect your daughter to be a dancer, it's a good name, but no decent parent would name their child Kitty. She was 23 years old, 5'2" and 115 pounds, a bubbly, fun-loving blonde. That's all I saw in my drunken state. A sweet smile and perfect braless breasts pointed in my direction allowed me to say hi. She looked at me and said, "Todd, let's walk on the beach alone." A million thoughts flashed through my head in an instant. The first one was about my beautiful wife and how I couldn't do this to her. I made vows. I was a reasonable, responsible, conservative adult. I went to church on Sundays. I paid taxes. I had money and a position in society. I had two beautiful children and a beautiful house in the suburbs. I drove a BMW for God's sake. This is not who I was. I did not accept the devil's handmaid's invitation to walk along a private deserted beach at night in Key West. And then I found myself getting up from the chair, taking her hand and walking towards the door to the street. We walked in relative silence for about 40 minutes until we reached a very secluded section of the beach. Along the way, she stopped to buy a small bottle of Jack Daniels for us. When we got there, we sat down and she started asking me questions about who I was and where I was from. I found myself answering honestly. As a priest, she knew how to listen carefully without judging. She asked about my children, about how I was Mike's baseball coach when he was little. We talked about Terry and her studies at UNC. Kitty seemed very interested in stories about how I took the kids on hikes and waterfalls in western South Carolina. She wanted to hear about my business and what I liked to do for fun before coming to Key West. The only thing she didn't ask about was my wife, Stacy. Not a word was said about her. We were on the beach for about an hour, sitting on the sand, listening to the soft waves crashing on the shore. Then, after a short pause, she handed me the bottle, looked me straight in the eyes, and whispered, "What's your wife's name?" I replied, "What makes you think I'm married? You've seen me at the same bar for a week, and I've never been with anyone." She smiled, took another short sip, and said, "I looked into your eyes for 5 days in a row. The emptiness is getting stronger. Only this kind of pain can come from someone you truly love. You're still wearing your wedding ring. This means that she either recently died or cheated on you. Which one?" I was very quiet for about a minute. All we could hear was the ocean. I quietly answered, "Second. Her name is Stacy, and a week ago, she told me she was unfaithful. After she told me this, I got up and left her." We sat for another 30 minutes. Not a word was said. We just passed the bottle between us and drank. Finally, Kitty looked at me and decided to speak. She said, "Do you love her?" "What?" I answered, not knowing how to answer this question. "Do you love her?" she repeated quietly, so quiet that I could barely hear her. I thought for a few minutes and finally said, "Yes, this is what makes my heart hurt so much that I want to die." "Tell me what happened," she whispered. "I told you, bits and pieces, from the first time I saw her walking into the backyard of the fraternity house to smoke, to the moment I left Georgia's state." When I finished, we were silent again. For about the next 20 minutes, not a word was spoken. We just kept passing the bottle. All I could hear was the waves and Kitty's quiet sobs as we drank Tennessee whiskey. Finally, she turned to me and asked if I wanted to hear her story. She said it might help me understand and feel better about my situation. Curious about what she had to say, I looked at her and said, "Of course I have the whole night, and in fact the whole week, and possibly the rest of my life." For the next hour, Kitty told me about her life. She was born in rural Florida, not the part with the mouse or killer whale. In a part of Florida where a 2-unit trailer is considered a luxury. Her mother became pregnant by her father, who was 54. He left shortly after Kitty was born, almost a year later. It was her father who gave her the nickname Kitty. Her real name was Tanya, and she admitted that she preferred Tanya, but everyone had known her as Kitty for so long that the nickname stuck. Her mom tried to do her best, but since she was just a waitress, she had to work and try to be both parents. Kitty had a grandmother until she was 12, but when she died, Kitty was left alone. Even though Kitty had better than average grades, which was surprising given her life, she eventually believed that her only path to success was to try to find a man who could take care of her. So, when Billy arrived at the tender age of 19, she accepted his proposal, and they were married 6 months later. The strange part of this story was that Kitty still had plans for her life. With a high school diploma, a job as a bartender, and plenty of ambition, she planned to go back to school and become a nurse. But as with all good stories, problems arose. Billy lost his job and couldn't find another one. It made him angry and often made him drunk. He spent their savings on nights out with friends and came home stinking of alcohol and other women. The anger eventually turned to rough sex. Rock bottom was reached when Billy tried to convince Kitty that he could share her with his friends. He insisted it would be fun. This was not fun for Kitty. The end came when their landlord threatened to kick them out of their squalid apartment for non-payment of rent. Billy spent the rent money on illegal drugs. Since Kitty was the only one who worked and made money, she said something about it. In response, he hit her. It was only once, but once was enough. This happened 3 months ago. After Billy fell asleep, Kitty packed her things, took the car and drove south until she ended up in Key West. She hid and lived in her car for 2 months until she saved up enough money from her day job as a waitress to rent a room from a friend who had a spare bedroom. Throughout the entire conversation, she never looked at me. I couldn't help but think about how different our situations were. After a few minutes of silence, she looked at me and said, "All I wanted was to study and become a nurse, to find someone who would love me as much as I love them, to have the life that my grandmother always wanted for me before she died." I sat there and thought about something other than Stacy for the first time in a week. I turned and looked at Kitty, and she looked at me and then said, "I saw how you felt sorry for yourself for days and tried to get drunk to forget. You had your time to feel sorry for yourself. You have a wonderful life. You love your wife, otherwise you would have already hooked up with one of the young beauties at the bar a week ago. And since you truly love your wife and your children, it's time to stand up and fight to get her back. You're better than this, and I'm going to help you." I was surprised by this revelation. I thought we came to the beach to have sex. However, here in front of me was this girl, about the same age as my daughter, who had lived a life much worse than mine, and she was telling me to get my head out of my ass and start living. All I could say was, "But how?" Kitty looked me straight in the eye and said, "First of all, if you really love her, go back there and get her. Bring her back. Show her who her man is. Show her what she's lost. And if she still wants to go in another direction, then you can raise your head with pride and walk on this earth, knowing that you did everything possible to save your marriage." And with that, Kitty began her mission. She stood up and said she would handle everything for the next 24 hours if I let her. The first thing she wanted to do was get me cleaned up. She said I smelled badly, very, very bad. The next thing I needed to figure out was why my wife slept with someone else and what I was going to do about it. It was around 3 a.m. when we got back to my crummy hotel room. I walked in and Kitty looked at him over, commenting on how handsome he was. I looked at her, thinking she must be joking, but was saddened to see that she wasn't. My miserable room was better than anything this poor girl lived in. For the first time in a long time, a new feeling came over me. I felt ashamed. She told me to go to bed, and in the morning we were going to put my life in some order, whatever that means at the moment. I collapsed on one bed, and she went to sleep on the other. When I woke up at 10 a.m., she was already washed, dressed, and ready to go. With a big smile on her face, she told me that she was taking the day off from her job as a waitress because she had more important things to do. It really warmed me up to see her smile. I took a shower, and after I finished, Kitty told me to get back in the shower and shave. She wasn't going to go out with me if I looked and smelled like a homeless person. After the second shower, Kitty asked me where my other clothes were because I had put the clothes I took off back on, and the smell was still there. I told her that I had no other clothes. I told her that I left home and wore the same clothes for over a week. I swear she almost lost her breakfast right there. Declaring that we wouldn't put up with this kind of crap, we walked out to a wrecked 1992 Toyota Corolla that looked like it had been in several accidents. She sat in the passenger seat and moved to the driver's seat, saying the driver's door was broken. I set a limit and said no way. We'll go shopping in my BMW M3. You'd think it was her first time sitting in a luxury car as she settled into the soft leather seats. Until that moment, I believed that she still considered me some kind of tramp, living on her last penny. We spent the next few hours shopping. It was fun, and for Keith, you, and for me. I ended up taking out my credit card and spending $2,500 on clothes for both of us. It took me almost 30 minutes to convince Kitty that I could afford the clothes she had chosen for herself, and that this was my way of saying thank you for giving me my first smile all week. After a long morning of shopping, we put our clothes in the car and went to lunch at the Hot Tin Roof restaurant in Key West. Let's just say that Kitty had never been to such a place in her life. They served the best steaks and lobsters. In addition, we had delicious oysters, rich desserts, and excellent wine. 3 hours later, Kitty developed Operation Todd Retrieval. Yes, we were a little drunk on wine when we came up with the name, but the plan was for me to meet Stacy and decide what was next in my life. Kitty was quickly becoming my little guardian angel. Sean. When Todd's credit card was used in Key West, I was notified immediately. Since we knew where his credit cards were, all that was left was to find him and force him to listen to Stacy's explanation of what happened to Peter. I needed to act quickly. At that point, we learned more about what Peter did at the retreat. He deliberately drugged Stacy and had sex with her. He took pictures of them having sex and planned to blackmail her into getting promoted to vice president of marketing at their company when he returned to Atlanta. How did we know this? Let's just say never, ever mess with an Atlanta cop who's out for revenge. After being arrested, Peter found himself in a small room without cameras with 3 very angry police officers. He soon happily confessed everything to Beth, including the fact that he had cheated on his taxes. My first call was to Beth and then to Tony. I wanted to get their thoughts on how we should break the news to Stacy. She was at home all week, either drinking herself into oblivion or falling apart at the seams. It was only a matter of time before the kids found out about the problem and came home to help. Either that, or Stacy will simply lose everything, resulting in the loss of her job and the life she worked so hard to build. Tony offered a solution. I needed to fly to Key West today and find Todd. As his best friend, I had to sit with him and explain what happened and try to convince him that it wasn't Stacy's fault. He would believe me. Besides, I had to convince him to come home and talk to her before it was too late. Tony took it upon herself to tell Stacy that Todd's credit cards had been used in Key West and that I was heading out to find him. She wanted to emphasize to Stacy that even though we found the credit cards, that didn't mean we found Todd. However, we all thought the trail was good and her best friends were with her and I was on the trail. Beth agreed with the plan of action, but told me to buy 2 tickets. In her opinion, 2 people looking for Todd are better than 1. Todd. It's amazing what good food, good wine, and good company can do for a person's mood. I even smiled a few times during lunch. I felt better and fresher. I felt like I could at least face the world. No, my pain has not gone away. My heart was still bleeding from my wife's confession, and I realized that my life would never be the same as before, but at least there was hope that I could continue to live. A 23-year-old cocktail waitress with little hope of a normal life pulled me out of my personal hell and back into a reality where I still have a life. For myself, for your children, and maybe even for my wife. When the bill arrived, I paid and looked at Kitty, asking if she had ever been to Atlanta. She looked at me with bewilderment. With a confused look on her face, she replied, "No, why? I want to take you with me. All expenses are paid. I need your help. I need your support. You showed me the way out of my hell. Now I want to show you the way out of yours. Come with me. Be there when I meet Stacy. You are the only friend in the world that I trust now. I don't know the full extent of what Stacy did or to whom. I also don't know which of my friends knew about it in advance and laughed at me behind my back. All I know is that you were there for me at the worst moment of my life, for no reason, and tried to help me get my life back in order. Come with me, please. I beg you. I need your help, I pleaded. And so, 30 minutes later, we found ourselves in my BMW with our newly purchased items, heading south in Florida on our way to Atlanta. When we arrived in Homestead, I withdrew $350 from the ATM and made a quick call to my best friend Sean from the payphone. I wanted him to know that I was alive and that I was on my way back to Atlanta and should be there in 2 days. I was only able to leave a voice message. I also called Beth, and her number was the same. I thought about calling Stacy or Tony, but I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. It was around 9 p.m. when we finally stopped at the hotel for the night. We were tired after a long day of shopping, wine, and driving. We needed to rest. This time I wasn't going to stay in a miserable place. We stayed at a five-star hotel. I decided to pay for the room in cash, but a credit card was required for the incident deposit. Kitty used her credit card to secure a room for the night. I would use my map, but I was still worried about people finding out where I was. I was too hurt to allow myself to be found. I was still grieving inside, and while no one knew where I was, I felt protected or safe thanks to my anonymity. Sean. When we landed in Key West, I turned on my phone as we were about to taxi. There was one call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Todd. He said he was calling me from a payphone and said he was on his way home to Atlanta. He will be there in 2 days. To say that I was relieved is to say nothing. Naturally, I tried to call back, but ended up talking to a nice couple from Omaha who said the payphone outside the diner was ringing, and they decided to answer. Beth received almost the same message on her phone as I did. Essentially, the message was a request to find me. She quickly called Stacy and Tony and told them the results of the investigation. I could almost hear Stacy's sigh of relief that Todd was still alive and at least coming home so she could face him and beg for his forgiveness. Beth was quick to point out that Stacy wasn't having sex of her own free will. As bad as it sounds, if Todd can't accept what Stacy has to say, then he's not the same person she's known for the last 30 years. She also added that if Todd can't forgive Stacy, then she won't have anything to do with him in the future. After Beth hung up, she looked at me and said, "Our group of friends at the prestigious University of Georgia will take care of this, and when everything returns to normal, I will find and kill Peter for the pain he caused my friends." And I believed her. Over the next 2 hours, we found a hotel, rebooked our flights back to Atlanta the next day, and I fell asleep next to my loving wife, knowing that if I ever let her down, no one would ever find my body. Todd. The day has come that I have been dreading for over a week. I had to meet Stacy and find out the truth about her cheating. What will this conversation be like? Will I have to listen to her talk about the man she slept with? Listen to her talk about how much better he was in bed than me. How much bigger was he? How did she let him do things to her that she never let me do? Or will I have to listen to her beg for forgiveness? Explains that it was a one-time mistake. How she only truly loves me, and that it was just sex and didn't mean anything. Ha, just sex, didn't mean anything. She let another man take what was mine. We vowed to God and our families to reject everyone else, and she didn't keep that promise. How could I ever forgive this? How could I ever trust her again? Even if she says it was a one-time mistake and that she only loves me, how will I ever get the image of her allowing another man to penetrate her out of my head? I must have been deep in thought for several hours before Kitty said anything to me. She realized that I was suffering from the upcoming meeting, and this again began to destroy me from the inside. She told me to relax. What happened is already in the past. It's done, and there's no point in letting it eat me up inside. Then she asked me to tell her what was bothering me so we could talk about it, and she could help me get through it. A few hours later, after I had cried out all my fears and problems, we crossed the Georgia border. There were only a few hours left until home. It was at this point in the trip that Kitty showed me a new level of maturity. She asked me to let her drive the car so I could make some calls from her phone. Personally, I think she just wanted to try driving something other than the Corolla she's had since she was 16. Confused, I stopped, we switched places, and I asked her who I should call. She told me to call a few marriage counselors and see if I could get any of them to talk to me about my situation. I never knew it was possible to do therapy over the phone, but I soon learned that with a credit card, anything is possible. It took me a while, but I was able to find a certified marriage counselor, Dr. Blake, who had free time and was willing to talk. I gave Dr. Blake my credit card number, and we started right away. At first, she was against it, saying that I needed to come to her office, But when I explained my situation, she said, "Okay," and I found myself in my first therapy session. Over the next hour, I explained the last 2 weeks in as much detail as possible. Dr. Blake asked a few questions and sometimes asked Kitty something. I was surprised at how much pain I felt, and at the same time, it felt easier when I said it all out. After an hour, I stopped and asked Dr. Blake what she thought I should do. Her answer was simple. You need to talk to Stacy and understand what happened, why it happened, what Stacy thinks about the future for her and for you. And then you have to make a decision. What is the solution? I asked. Dr. Blake said it very clearly. Either she wants to continue without you or she doesn't. Stacy needs to tell you. If she decides that she wants to continue living with you as her husband, then you need to decide whether your life will be better with or without her. It's so simple. Is it that simple? Are you crazy? Nothing is that simple. Dr. Blake and Kitty let me scream for about 5 minutes before Kitty spoke up and said, "I agree." Dr. Blake continued, "You have a decision to make. Yes or no. If you decide that your life will be better without her, then you need to get a divorce. You will never be able to regain the trust and love that you had in your previous life. Trying to do this is a mistake for both you and her. You hurt yourself and her and your children and your friends. Pull yourself together and tear off the bandage. However, if she says she wants to get over it and you decide that your life will be better with her, then the hard work begins. You will have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for months, or perhaps years, until a new bridge of communication and mental foundation is built. You will never get your old life back. This life is over. She died. If you try to go back to what you had before her confession, you will fail, like so many before you. You need to build your new life with Stacy, and you need to learn to live and love again. You need to build on that foundation every day. You must strengthen and strengthen this foundation every day for the rest of your life. If either of you stop giving 100%, you will quickly return to where you are today, and it will end in divorce. Wow, I thought to myself. In 3 hours on the phone, I probably received 15 weeks of marriage counseling without my wife's involvement. So what now, I thought? How can I cope with the next 24 hours? Heck, with the next 3 hours as we approached Atlanta's outer beltway. Dr. Blake offered a simple solution. Give her Stacy's phone number and she'll call Stacy. She will try to convince her to talk and, if possible, come to her office this evening. What? Tonight? Yes, tonight, said Dr. Blake. I had to go straight to Dr. Blake's office and wait for Stacy. I would meet her there, in the presence of our marriage counselor, if she decided to still be married. Dr. Blake made another important point. If Stacy truly believes it was a mistake, and she's truly sorry and wants to get over it, showing up at Dr. Blake's office in the evening, unannounced, would be a good sign. A sign of trust, a sign of positive movement in our marriage, a sign of our progress. I agreed. We had a plan. Kitty and I will go to Dr. Blake's office and meet Stacy there if she decides to come. The confrontation will take place, shooting at OK Corral. I'll have Kitty and I'm sure Stacy will bring Tony. I wish there was Sean. However, at this point, I still wasn't sure if he and Beth knew about the affair and didn't tell me. I gave Dr. Blake Stacy's phone number and received her office address. Kitty entered it into the GPS, and we told Dr. Blake that we were on our way to see her and would be there soon. Then, right before I hung up, I told Dr. Blake, whether Stacy agrees or declines to come, I don't want to know until I get to your office. I just couldn't handle the defeat of hearing in the car that my marriage was over. Stacy, it's been almost 2 weeks since I heard from my husband Todd, and it's been the worst 2 weeks of my life. I was taken advantage of. I was further humiliated when Peter took naked photos of me, which he hoped to use for blackmail. If that wasn't enough, I had to tell my husband that I slept with another man, and then he went away for almost 2 weeks without contact. Fortunately, I had good friends. My best friend Tony spent almost every minute of the first week sitting or sleeping next to me while I cried. My other friends searched for my husband and even caught my rapist and forced him to confess. After the first week without news, I decided to return to work. This was a mistake. When I got there, everyone was talking about how Peter was arrested. I truly loved Beth. She was one of the best friends anyone could have. Of course, this brought me to tears, which led to my boss calling me into his office to talk. I confessed everything to my boss. She told me that at the retreat I had sex with Peter, that I confessed this to my husband, and he left. My boss listened to me while I cried for almost 2 hours. When I finally stopped, he asked, "Are you still in love with Todd?" Another 10 minutes of crying later, I was able to stammer, "Yes, more than anything. If only I could tell him it was a mistake. If only I could tell him how much I love him. I could fix everything. I could. I'm really good at fixing things. I am your best salesman. I could do it." My boss simply said, "There are more important things than work. Your faith and your family are the most important things. Go. Find your husband. Hug your husband. Do whatever it takes to win him back and prove to him that you love him more than the day you married him. When you do this, call me and your position will be waiting for you. I don't care if it takes a week, a month, or a year. With the exception of Peter, we are family and we will support you." And with those words, I left his office to begin my journey to rebuilding my marriage. The next few days did not fly by. There were still a lot of tears, a lot of pain, and a lot of alcohol to help me sleep at night. My friends were with me the whole time, but apart from the trail in Key West, we found nothing. Todd disappeared. He told Sean he was coming back, but nothing has happened yet. Until the call came. It was around 8 p.m. when the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed it was Sean and Beth calling to say they were back from Key West. But since it was an unfamiliar number, I put it on speaker so Tony could hear. I prayed it was Todd. It wasn't him. It was a woman named Dr. Blake, whom I had never met before. Dr. Blake introduced herself and said she was Todd's consultant. Who is it? Consultant? How long did he see the consultant? Oh, it just kept getting worse and worse. He saw the consultant behind my back and didn't tell me about it. What else did he do? My mind was racing at the speed of light, thinking of every worst-case scenario I could imagine. And believe me, after this week, very vivid images appeared in my head. Consultant? Does Todd have a consultant? That's all I could say. After a short pause, Dr. Blake quietly said that she was Todd's marriage counselor. Could this get any worse? My husband has a marriage counselor, and I came home to tell him I was unfaithful with another man. I could just pull out a gun and shoot the marriage in the head. He is dead. Again, after a brief pause that I assumed Dr. Blake was giving me so I could say something, she announced that she had been hired by Todd 3 hours ago, and he was heading to her office with Kitty. With Kitty? Who is Kitty? Tony looked at me with a blank expression. We didn't know anyone named Kitty. Did this bastard find himself a dancer to have sex with in revenge? I was starting to get angry, and Tony quickly tried to calm the situation down. Tony asked, "Who is Kitty?" Dr. Blake replied, "This is his travel companion." We both looked at each other with expressions of confusion. I didn't know what to say, so Tony asked, "Dr. Blake, why did you call?" Dr. Blake's response was simple. "Todd is struggling with the news you told him over a week ago. He internally experiences the situation and tries to understand who he is, what your marriage is like, and whether it will exist in the future. He is heading straight to my office from Florida and should be here in less than an hour for a counseling session. He asked me to invite you to a session if you would like to discuss whether the marriage can continue. He doesn't promise that this is the case, but he is willing to listen to you and talk to you. My office is located in the Thurston building on the 3rd floor. If you would like to join the session, it starts in exactly 48 minutes. Thanks for your time. Goodbye." And with that, Dr. Blake hung up. 48 minutes. 48 minutes. Thurston building. Kitty. Who is Kitty? 47 minutes. What the hell should I wear? What to say? Will he believe me? Will he divorce me? Do I have a chance? Who is Kitty? Oh God, what should I do? And who is Kitty? Yes, my mind was working at supersonic speed. I should thank God more often for such good friends. Instead of wondering who Kitty was, Tony focused on our next move. She was already running upstairs to get my husband's favorite little black dress from the closet. She took my 4-inch heels and black tights and told me to get dressed. She almost screamed at me. If you are going down, then do it with dignity. You have to show Todd the woman he fell in love with and married. While I was getting dressed, Tony called Sean and Beth, who had just returned home from a flight from Key West. She turned them around and sent them straight to the Thurston building. She said, "If I have to prove that I was taken advantage of, Todd will need to hear that confirmation from someone he trusts with his life," and that was Sean. Tony then grabbed me and shoved me into the car, telling me to start putting on my makeup. I looked in the mirror and realized why. I have aged 15 years in the last 2 weeks. I looked worse than crap. As we set off, trying to get there on time, I glanced at my watch. 42 minutes to get to the far side of Atlanta. Impossible even at night with empty roads. I don't know how, but about 3 miles away, a police car from Atlanta started following us. I heard Tony whisper, "Damn, there's a good chance of getting there in 38 minutes. I started crying when the phone rang and Tony put it on speaker. It was Beth. All she said was, "Follow the car with the blue lights and don't stop at anything, I love you." And in the blink of an eye, a car with blue lights turned on its flashing lights and drove past us, as if we were standing still. When we got on the highway, we were going just over 105 miles per hour. Tony could barely hold on. As we approached the Thurston building, our blue light turned off its lights, slowed down, and we passed it, pulling into the parking lot. We arrived a few minutes before the appointed time. I ran into the building, waited 10 seconds for the elevator, then decided to take the stairs with Tony behind me. Thanks Stairmaster, because 3 floors and 4-inch heels is a challenge. We reached the 3rd floor and ran to the office. When we opened the door in the lobby, a very young, attractive, well-dressed woman sat watching us. We stared at each other. No one said a word. I felt like one of 2 lionesses ready to attack each other for being the alpha in the pride. She then stood up, walked over to me, extended her hand and said, "Hi, you must be Stacy. I'm Kitty. I've heard so much about you and your family from Todd. You are much more beautiful than he described. He's with Dr. Blake now, and they're waiting for you inside." And then she smiled. Todd. So here I am, sitting here for 5 minutes in a very comfortable chair, feeling my heart sink lower and lower, thinking that Stacy won't come. My hand shook when I met Dr. Blake and got our financial affairs in order. I also learned a little about her 20 years of practice. She was a graduate of Duke Medical School and was highly respected. In the 5 minutes that I was here, she calmed me down and said that we would get through this together. I'm not alone. Then the door opened and I was face to face with my wife again. Stacy has arrived. This woman with whom I had so many loving memories. Memories that flashed through my head like a movie at speed. All the ups and downs. All this. This woman turned my life upside down with one sentence. My first thought was, she looks tired. I realized that even with makeup, she had not slept for a long time. She was wearing my favorite dress, her little black one with 4-inch heels. Damn, it makes her look sexy. Sexy, I thought. Sexy? Isn't that what probably got her into this problem? She probably looked sexy to someone else, and that's how her affair began. Think. Think. What Dr. Blake just said. Think. Stop letting your imagination run wild. Listen first. My thoughts are destroying me. Shut your damn mouth and just listen to her. Stacy came to hug me and talk, but I held out my hand to stop her. I was in no mood to touch her. I was still very angry, and until I heard why she betrayed me, us, our family, I didn't want her to touch me. She started crying and then sat down opposite me. I looked at her, then at Dr. Blake, and thought, is this the end? Dr. Blake was the first to speak. She introduced herself as Stacy and spoke briefly about her experience in clinical psychology. Then she looked Stacy straight in the eyes, those same deep blue eyes I fell in love with years ago, and asked, Can you tell Todd exactly what happened so he can understand and process it? She then asked Stacy, finish by telling Todd whether you really want the marriage to continue or whether you think it's a waste of time. Well, to Dr. Blake's credit, she didn't beat around the bush. Stacy. I thought, damn, this is the end. He didn't want to touch me. He doesn't want me. Well, damn it, if he doesn't want me with him after this, at least I can feel like I did everything I could. He was and is my whole world. I looked him straight in the eye, just like the first time I saw him on the porch at a student party, and said quietly, I was drugged with something and taken advantage of at the retreat by Peter. He wanted to make me believe that we were having an affair, and he took naked photos of me to blackmail me. He was arrested and put in prison, and he confessed everything. Beth and Sean should be there in a few minutes to confirm the story. This is the whole truth. And finally, now, who the hell is Kitty? Todd. I didn't think I could be more emotional than I have been the last 2 weeks. I was wrong. On a scale of 1 to 10, my emotions were running back and forth. This brought me straight to the top 10. Confusion, anger, hatred. The hatred is not for Stacy, but for Peter, and more self-hatred. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I collapsed and started to cry, curled up. I couldn't stand it. I cried and fell on the floor at my wife's feet. All I could think was that I had failed her. I wasn't there to protect her. Stacy. I didn't know how to react. My husband, my rock, my lover, my life. He had said 2 words to me in the last 3 weeks, and now he was lying on the floor in the fetal position, bawling his eyes out. I didn't know how to react. What emotion was the strongest inside me? Was it anger? Was it disgusting? Was it sympathy? Was it hatred? Was it love? This was the man I had loved most of my life, and I didn't know how he felt. All I knew was that he was crying. I looked at Dr. Blake, and she was looking at me with her mouth wide open. I don't think this was the answer she expected. The door swung open. Tony and Kitty came to see what all the fuss was about. They just looked at me and Todd lying on the floor crying. A few seconds later, Sean and Beth walked in and just stared with their mouths open, wondering what they missed. I really didn't know what to do. We all felt like we had been standing there for hours, but it was actually seconds when Kitty looked at me and asked what I said to Todd. I just told him that during my retreat I was drugged and taken advantage of. With a look of trust in her eyes, this woman, whom I had never met, and who was probably younger than my daughter, asked me to let her handle it. Puzzled by the situation and not knowing whether it was my husband's new mistress, I did not know how to respond. So I just shook my head, okay. Kitty slowly lowered herself and hugged Todd. She whispered to him, Look, stupid, she loved you all this time. As I already told you, there was a good reason why this happened, and it had nothing to do with you. Todd looked at her, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I heard my husband's voice. But my job was to protect her. I failed her, and when she needed me most, I failed her again when I jumped to conclusions, and again when I abandoned her. Kitty looked him straight in the eyes and loudly barked, Nonsense! Damn it! Hell no! It is not your fault. Of course, you should have braced yourself when she first told you about it, but you freaked out, ran away, and looked where it got you. I listened to you complain for days on the way back from Florida that if you ever had a chance to show your wife how much you loved her, you would. So get off your damn lazy ass, kiss your woman, and take what is yours. And we all just looked at this young girl, stunned by her wisdom. Todd stood up, got down on one knee, looked me straight in the eyes, and asked, Will you forgive me, and will you be my wife forever from this day forward? Through tears I answered, Yes, absolutely yes. Oh God, yes. I love you. I love you so much. I missed you so much. I pulled Todd to his feet, pressed my lips to his, and showed him how much I missed him. When we stopped kissing, I looked back and saw that everyone was still crying. Sean grabbed Todd and gave him a bear hug. Tony and Beth grabbed me and hugged me as hard as they could. I looked at Dr. Blake, who was wiping her eyes, and she said, On one hand, my work here is done. However, on the other hand, I think we should start seeing each other at least twice a week. Sooner or later, it will hit you. You both will have many ups and downs, but I am sure that in the end, you both will love. This will come out well. And with that, I turned and looked at Kitty. I grabbed her and pulled her into my arms. I didn't know who this girl was, but it was obvious that she not only saved my husband, but also my marriage. After releasing her, I looked at Todd, hoping he would give me some answers. All he said was, "Stacy, please let me introduce you to Tanya. In her previous life, she was known as Kitty. I know it's a lot to ask of you, but she needs our help." Epilogue. Todd. When we all eventually left Dr. Blake's office and went home, Tanya naturally came with us. This gave her the opportunity to officially meet Stacy and our friends. We all sat and talked for a while. Stacy started and her friends helped her fill in the blanks. There were frequent pauses when we could not control our emotions. Tanya and I went last and told everyone what had happened since I left the house. After everything was done, Stacy and her friends thanked Tanya for what she had done for our marriage and practically begged her to stay in Atlanta forever. It was Stacy who suggested that Tanya move into the apartment above our garage so she could get her life in order and start following her dreams. After everyone left, Stacy and I sat drinking wine and talking until the morning. It was a long conversation that should have taken place over a week ago. Tonya moved into our garage. I asked her about her things in Florida, and she said the only important things she had were the new clothes still in the BMW. After hearing about her previous life, Tony agreed to become her lawyer, and although Tonya wanted nothing from the divorce, Tony made Billy pay dearly for hitting her. Tony's next hurdle was returning to school. She studied hard, passed her exams, and was accepted into the prestigious Emory School of Nursing. Since it was going to cost her a small fortune, Stacy and I offered to help with the expenses and let her stay in the apartment for free until she graduated a few years later. Terry and Mike eventually found out that there was a problem between Stacy and me. This came to light just before Thanksgiving when they returned home to find Tanya living in a garage apartment. Eventually, Stacy sat them down and told them everything. She told our children that if Tanya hadn't pulled me out of my depression, I probably would have drunk myself to death in Key West, and for that she owed her a lot. It was a little strange at first, but after a few hours you would have thought that Terry, Mike, and Tanya were brother and sisters. Terry graduated from UNC and became a pharmacist. Mike tried his hand at triple A baseball for 2 years before taking an engineering job at a small consulting firm in Marietta. Tanya graduated from Emory with her nursing degree shortly after having her children and went to work at one of the best hospitals in Atlanta at the recommendation of her close friend, Dr. Blake. I was fortunate enough to walk Terry and Tanya down the aisle at both of their weddings. For Stacy and I, we did have some tough times. No one could go through the kind of trauma we went through without it affecting the marriage. We had to see Dr. Blake for over a year. As you can imagine, we had some very unpleasant moments during this time. There was often silence. Sometimes there were accusations. And of course, there were fights. We made up a lot, and the sex was amazing. But it was no picnic. However, about a year later, I came home one day and noticed that Stacy was no longer smoking, drinking wine on the back porch. I took this as a sign that things were returning to normal. She no longer had nightmares, and I was 100% dedicated every day to the success of our future. As for Peter, he eventually received parole and was released from prison several years later. Stacy was worried at first, so I suggested she go back to see Dr. Blake alone for a while. I was really worried that the nightmares would start again, that Stacy would start smoking again, and that everything we had worked for would fall apart, and then he just disappeared. This made Stacy even more nervous until Beth asked her to talk privately. Immediately after their conversation, Stacy felt much better. Later that evening, I asked Stacy what Beth told her. Stacy told me that Beth simply smiled at her and said, "Don't worry about him, honey. I don't think the body will ever be found." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.